have all seen before. And now we're going to start the stream with me talking about my facial hair.
That's right.
So what a way to start the stream, as we're just like jumping in randomly to a conversation that you didn't know the start of beforehand, just like on social justice alchemy.
Do you know?
Hello.
Do you know why I did that? Because that is my experience when I come in to sit down after having already invited you dipshits into and you're always in the middle of a conversation, and I sit down and I'm like, oh, what are they talking about now? So now everybody watching can know exactly what it's like. So
well, it's a process of discovery, Steve.
Exactly, like all great works of narrative, there should be a process of discovery, right? You go on a journey.
It's like the classic Snoopy business where he says, it was a dark and stormy night. Suddenly a gunshot rang out.
So right before we started the stream proper, there was someone mentioned, Nick was showing us one of his Lego things, and we were talking about Maximum Overdrive, and then we were talking about what a prolific film director Cocaine was in the 1980s. Because Maximum Overdrive, the credited director of Maximum Overdrive is the master of horror himself, Stephen King, but the real director of Maximum Overdrive, I think everybody agrees, it was the drug cocaine, which came to life and became a sentient being and directed that film.
That certainly explains a lot. Like we said before, pretty much like Cocaine directed a lot of movies in the 80s, and Cocaine was very influential in the anime industry of the 80s as well.
I'm pretty sure Cocaine directed Cobra as well. If I
Caddyshack.
Oh, Caddyshack. Yeah.
I think that movie's still on cocaine.
One night I was binge watching old Sylvester Stallone movies, just realizing like how bad and ridiculous they were, but so enjoyable.
What a great shitty career Sylvester Stallone has had, right? I mean, he made so many enjoyably awful movies in the 80s.
Hey, listen, you gotta love like Judge Dredd or Demolition Man, which are 90s, but
carrying on the legacy.
Demolition Man had a sense of humor, at least.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it for that.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, to be honest with you, the First Blood was actually, on its own, actually a good movie. Now, what came after, like you said, were like hilariously bad and enjoyably bad. But the first one was actually good.
Well, it at least tried to have something to say.
Right.
Like it at least in between all of like the action schlock, like it tried to say something meaningful.
Well, it was trying to be the typical commentary on post-Vietnam, whatever have you, sort of business. Well, and it sort of did it, but I'm not even sure.
See, Lauren, actually, the thing, it wasn't typical then. It started the typical narrative on Vietnam, which is kind of interesting. The irony, the sad part about it is what it became. So it became this thing of like, hey, look what the U.S. did to these soldiers, and we used them up, and they all came back, and we treated them like shit, and ended up being this jingoistic, let's kill foreigners,
Yeah. Well,
support the troops as we go over there and fight the war on terror. Which
apart from the ones Trump doesn't like, don't support them.
Yeah, exactly. The wars that Trump doesn't like.
Those guys are assholes.
Yeah.
It's the war on terror, where it always happen in places where there's oil deposits.
Yes, the war.
We must spread freedom.
The first war declared on a concept.
Yeah,
on a tactic. It's a war on a tactic, not a particular organization or state, but it's a war on a tactic.
The war on Qatar.
Yeah.
We need a war on hunger that actually solves it and doesn't just kill poor people.
I mean, we had.
I have suggestions. But
we had a war
on the economic system.
We had a war on poverty for about 20 years. That was going pretty well until they stopped. Until they stopped it. Like when I was a kid, they're like, we're good.
It's seriously going on. We just don't know about it.
Well, see, when you were a kid,
you guys just reminded me of. I don't know how familiar anybody is with like whatever video game this is from. It's one of the Metal Gear ones, but one of the best parts of it were these vocal tracks that were written for the boss encounters. So it's like as you fight them, you're hearing a bit of their life story and their thought process. You're getting to know them through the music. And there was this one near the end where you're taking on this senator called Armstrong, who's trying to start some more crap in the Middle East to get himself elected president. And so here's the song that here's the lyrics from that song that plays during his section. The unenlightened masses, they cannot make the judgment call. Give up free will forever. Their voices won't be heard at all. Display obedience while never stepping out of line and blindly swear allegiance. Let your country control your mind. It just goes on saying like, live in ignorance and purchase your happiness. When blood and sweat is the real cost, thinking ceases, the truth is lost. Don't you worry, you'll be told exactly what to do. I give my people the lives they need. The righteous will succeed. It just goes on about like collective consciousness and how freedom isn't real and all that stuff. And it just starts repeating, let your country control your soul. Let your country control your soul.
You know what that's an extension of, don't you? It's what's his name speech in the middle of the movie Network. I can't think of
Howard Beale.
His name.
Howard Beale.
Not Beale, but the guy who coerced Beale
the other
into
guy.
going in.
I
can't think of his name, but to which Beale reacted, I have seen the face of God.
Yeah.
Well, see, one thing, Steve, to your point about it was going fine until while you were a kid.
Yeah.
Basically, that's when it switched from being a war on poverty to a war on the impoverished.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's still going on today.
Exactly.
I mean, great segue into mentioning the charity links that I just posted into the chat
indeed.
and in the description, because and actually the interesting thing is like how to solve the food crisis and stuff like that. The 2008 food crisis that the YouTuber Dumpster Fire did a video on was just totally manufactured. The reason why it's just a crisis because it's tied in with the financial crisis, because the people who control the food could not make money off it, and there's also the speculation, and because we see those things like food and housing and all those, a lot of things as commodities to trade that we must get a transaction for, because that's how we think of how to trade things or get things or acquire things, the transaction, as opposed to like just do things community. No, here's just food because people need food to eat. And so it's, again, treated as commodity, not a human right, where I think a lot of things need to be treated as a human right so that it's guaranteed.
Yeah, I will point out, though, that every time that people have, on paper, tried that, they've failed miserably. So the truth lies somewhere in between, I think.
Disagree.
Well, the thing that's really heartbreaking to me, to bring it back like specifically to the war on poverty that was policy in the United States for many years. If you go back and look at the numbers, right up until Reagan came into office and undid most of it, it was actually working.
Yes.
Like it wasn't, I mean, things weren't completely better. There were still serious problems, but like income inequality was shrinking, wages were rising, the quality of life for the poorest people was getting better. And it wasn't where it needed to be by any means, but it was the policies were working. Things were getting better. And then the Republicans take over in 1981, and it's just like, well, fuck that. We're not doing that anymore.
Well, and especially with the advent of trickle-down economics.
Neoliberalism, basically,
Well, and the Democrat, look, and it's easy for me to blame the Republicans, but the Democrats controlled Congress for many of those years, and they allowed much of it to happen. I mean, they weren't the driving force behind it, but we could look back now and say maybe they could have fought a little harder to stop some of that shit from happening.
Even in Bill Clinton, like the one of the appointees that ended up voting to have the impeachment proceedings to begin, Janet Reno, I believe, selected someone who was conservative essentially. So even in the 90s with Bill Clinton, they were trying to reach across to compromise with the Republicans who were far right, with because the Republicans are still under the ideology of Reagan, and so
it actually even more radical, and that's the thing. You're right. Janet Reno was trying to show, we're not trying to stack the deck with Clinton friendly people. We're going to put a Republican out there so you can trust Republicans, you can trust the result. And the irony to me is that, of course, that same guy comes in to defend Trump.
Yeah.
Mind you, 2 weeks after saying, once all the revelations from Lev Parnas came out, Ken Starr himself said, "Man, it's all over for Trump."
Can we just like at this point say that Republicans are fascists and no, we cannot win by pointing out that they're lying. They will continue to lie. Their base won't care.
Yeah, yes. I've thought that was a waste of time. Yeah, ever since Trump got elected, I've thought, okay, we need to stop. Because if you look at again, if you go back and you look at the research and the numbers about how things went down in 2016, Trump won the Electoral College because he did better than Clinton in a few key districts in a couple of states. So it's not like it was like this overwhelming, groundswell of support for Trump. He lost the national popular vote by quite a bit, and he only won the Electoral College by the historically narrow margin that he did because he got more votes than Hillary in a couple of spots.
Right.
So this idea that we need to flip all these Republicans in order to win this time is just ridiculous to me.
Well, the thing is, though, but that's not, to me, that's never ever been the issue.
Right.
You're right. Because
it's independence that we need to swing.
Right. It's the people in the middle who, and most of whom aren't either liberal. They're actually their views tend to be more liberal, but they don't associate with liberalism,
right?
Because they've been ignorant of it, but they are swayable, and I think that's really, getting them is essential. But the thing is, the way to do it though is you don't have to capitulate to Republican ideals, but I also think that you also understand that they're not as ape about some of the more progressive ideas that maybe some of the rest of us are.
Well,
and that's the reason why. And that's the reason why, like, a lot of people are hate on Mayor Pete because he says, Medicare for all who want it. The fact of the matter is, whether
a lot of right wingers, I've seen right wingers retweet that. So right wingers are into.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care, Pete. I really don't give a shit.
I think there's another.
Okay, I think that, let me finish the point, please.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
The point is that even just say Bernie gets elected, he's president, and he goes pull guns and puts it in, tries to put it in. If he even gets it passed, which is not a guarantee, but just say he does. It's going to take time. There's going to be a phase-in period. So when people got mad at Warren for saying she'd have a phase-in period, well, that's a practical matter. I mean, look how long it took 2 years to even start implementing Obamacare, and they apparently rushed it because when opening day it was a flop, and then they had to fix it, in which I think they did a reasonable recovery. But something this big and something this transformative, we can't afford to mess it up, because if we do, we'll never have it.
Well, not only can you can't just throw a switch on something like this. I mean, it's like throwing a switch on a 1 billion watt circuit or something like that.
Right.
And on top of that, as it comes to the whole business of dealing with Republicans, I think we need to draw a distinction between Republicans and Trumpians. Because Republicans you may be able to talk to. Trumpians, you're wasting your time.
I think it's a waste of time to talk to Republicans either, but that's me. But then again, I'm also from my position.
We live in a pluralistic society where.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. This is something that I think ties to all of this. Look, it's not that we're trying to sway Trump voters. That's basically what they're trying to do with Biden and now Bloomberg. They're hoping that those guys will be able to reach across the aisle. But if you give someone the choice between a Republican light and like a full-blown hardcore right-wing Republican, they're just going to go for that one because it's more of what they like. The thing is, most Americans are progressive when it comes to the issues, overwhelmingly so. They want these things. They just need a good sales pitch.
Right.
And that's where someone like Bernie or Warren, are good at it. And that's all we're really doing. It's not that most Americans are hardcore right wingers and we're trying to become more right wing to appeal to them. No. We're trying to remind them how progressive they
really are.
Yeah.
Well, just a couple of things.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, it's just like from my perspective as someone who lives in a very deep red county in Pennsylvania, I live in one of the most rural counties in Pennsylvania. And, the joke about Pennsylvania that it's, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in between it, it's 100% true.
Jeez.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But that's the deal I'm in. And I look at it sometimes like I can understand the appeal of going after the moderates when you look at how many seats the Democrats flip post like in some of the special elections where they ran more of a moderate candidate. Although sometimes I think some of our candidates that have been portrayed as moderate, if you look up and down their platform, they're not really that moderate. They're more to the left. It's just what are their main talking points and like what do they lead with? Because I think if you want to go after, if you want to go after the royal vote, you can still go after Medicare for all. Just don't lead with that. Lead with things like infrastructure, which I think the Democrats, if they could go get an infrastructure deal together, they could win over the Republic a lot of red areas.
Right.
Because that's what Trump promised and never delivered.
Right, and that's the thing. Yes, when you and both you guys are right. If you look at issues and you leave the labels off, 70% of the population of this country is for almost all of it. But it's how you package it, and that's the thing. And again,
or if the leaders all agree with it or not, because Nancy Pelosi has said things against it or not.
Yeah, I don't care. Stop fucking interrupting me. I'm trying to make a point.
Easy.
Jesus Christ.
It's talking about politics.
People are they're for the ideas, but if you lead, as Jacob says, you lead with certain things. People have been scared by the right wing for a long time because the right wing is way better at framing these things. Right. So that's something we're poor at because we write a book. See, like Trump. The reason why Trump wins is because he has a very simplistic slogan: "Make America Great." Who could argue with that idea? And a lot of other things like can't even think it's right now, but there's so many things. If you look at the way Republicans have framed it, well, hell, just the whole idea of right to work. Well, who would be against the right to work? Except if you actually look at the bill and see it actually takes away workers' rights. But
it's like
and if we're talking about certain things with the environment, you can lead with, well, you've got to drink the water that people are dumping into, or it's a path to energy independence.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's how you can frame it.
Are you guys aware how this appears from outside the United States?
No, people are just not. Unless they spend a lot
on Twitter. I can only imagine it appears really, really embarrassing and absurd.
It is like watching the stupid family at a sort of group therapy session.
The thing is that Americans have been taught. Americans.
Hang on. Let Robert finish his point.
Trump saying the economy is the strongest it's ever been in history. So there's one message. But they can't afford anything. They can't afford anything that will lead to the betterment of the population, whether it's healthcare or infrastructure or a wall or whatever dumb idea they think. So the economy is strong, which you would think means, right, we've got lots of money, but nothing's affordable apart from weapons.
Well, the country, the economy is the best that it's ever been for the 1%.
Right.
Yeah. He just didn't finish the sentence.
Well, just same way with healthcare.
That's not even true. Oh, sorry, Steve.
I was going to say it's the same thing with healthcare. We have the best healthcare in the system in the world. It's healthcare system in the world for people who can afford it.
Right.
Exactly.
You could say anything American. You can say anything American is the best in the world. You can say it's got the best legal system in the world. You can say it's got the best police in the world. You can say it's got the best hospitals in the world. Doesn't matter what it is. That's a line that runs in every U.S. election, regardless of what you're. You can say it's got the best traffic in the world. And people will all go, but it doesn't matter. It's we're number one regardless, and
it's American jingoism. It's patriotism, which is nationalism as well.
I know, but going back to my original point, when you look at it from the outside in, you have to wonder. Is the applause because people want to believe that that's the case, or is the applause because they just are ignorant?
A little bit of both.
A great deal of it is a second.
Yeah.
Well,
the thing is,
the whole issue of the informed electorate has way too much become past tense. Yeah. People do not want to be informed. They want to have their biases reinforced. My daughter, one of the reasons why my daughter quit journalism is because she ran headlong into this, and she was so discouraged by it, that she no longer she felt as though she was, pardon the phrase, pissing into the wind, and that's one of the reasons why she left that.
It's just astonishing to me how it is from the outside looking in. I mean, my father lives in the United States, and he's disabled and he has to pay through the nose for medications, whereas I'm disabled. I pay nothing for medications. My wife pays nothing for medications. Nobody in the UK pays any money for medications or for healthcare. It doesn't matter whether I'm rich or poor. I'm still going to get to see the best doctor in the UK. It doesn't matter whether I'm rich or poor. If I'm in trouble, I get the best lawyers in the UK. It doesn't matter how much money I've got. It's because it's a fairness of arms, if it's the phrase I believe it's called.
You don't have as many Calvinists as we do.
I know, and you know, when you look at it from the outside in, and it's the self-perception. So you get every politician of every color in the United States saying how amazing it is. And
not every color, but yeah, I know what you mean.
The city on the shining hill, and you know, I'm sure pretty much people in other countries sit again. Well, we're okay where we are, thanks.
Well, the problem, Robert, is somewhere along the thing is a lot of those best of things used to be true in the past. But the thing is that somewhere along the line, as we started to slip because basically our policies were crap, but it became almost an anathema. Like if you actually dare to say that, you know, everything isn't hunky dory, then like it's like you're anti-American. And it's funny because the right wing attacks America and Americans.
Which is another phrase that no one can define.
Only the right wing can criticize America.
Nick, did you want to say something? You were trying to jump in a couple times.
Yeah, sorry. It's just like the thing that needs to be understood is that despite everything that I said before, Americans' idea, their perception of what is left or right is completely skewed. What we consider left is just center. What we call Democrats would in any other Western country be called conservatives. And we are encouraged to, but the thing is,
we are left-wing member of the Democratic Party is still to the right of our Conservative Party.
But the thing is, Americans have been taught for decades to not give a crap about like other countries' view. Ours is the only one that matters. So if you tell somebody, hey, you know, like anywhere else in the world, that you know what we consider left or radical isn't actually radical at all, they'll just say, well, so what? Fuck them. They're other countries.
Well, I got to take issue with what Robert said, because if you're basically going to say like, just say Bernie Sanders is to the right of Boris Johnson, I'm going to say that you're making.
No, I'm sorry. Okay, you're right. Okay, I'm right.
You know what I mean? Everyone says that, but it's really not
the policies of the party. Yeah, you know, we've got universal health care.
Okay, that's different.
Universal access to justice. We've got, you know, immense number of social programs, which would be called socialist in the United States, but and again by the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, right. And again, socialism is the owners, the collective ownership and workers' ownership and control of the means of production, not just like welfare programs like the NHS or anything like that, which are great programs that like guarantee like healthcare to like everyone, guarantee like food to everyone. We need food stamps for all, honestly, guaranteed all these things for everyone, and like a council of housing. I guess there's maybe like a government to like provided like housings in places. I never had to like
it used to be.
I never had to like try to like use that.
But other things like the concept that rich people pay more tax is a generally accepted normality here. It's a banality there. The idea that rich people pay more tax in the United States is an affront to capitalism. It's how dare these people? These people are job creators and all this kind of stuff.
They never were job creators.
They just go, okay.
You know,
that's where the whole stupid mindset about trickle-down economics comes from. Except that there's this marvelous illustration that I had a long time ago. I could find it and put it up for you, where it says, you know, has these stacked glasses, and it says trickle down economics. You pour into the top glass and it spills down into the other glasses. What really happens? You pour into the top glass and the top glass gets bigger.
Exactly.
It's like I said about a year ago. The overturned window, you know, the framing has veered so far to the right that everything that should be normal seems extreme within that tiny framework.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, there's.
The extreme right is viewed as like quite normal, honestly.
These are all really good. You know, these are all really good examples of how I think, like, you know, how the idea of American exceptionalism, as it has been taught to us, like it warps our perception of things, and it makes it really difficult to do what we were talking about earlier, to appeal, you know, as liberals and progressives wanting to appeal not necessarily to people on the right, but to people
radicals
in the middle or people who are undecided or whatever.
Remember radicals.
You know, it can be difficult to sell people on like really relatively really progressive policies if they're afraid of them. And like that's where my pragmatism and my idealism kind of clash, because like I totally agree with what Joe was saying earlier, that you don't want to scare off potential supporters, because if you don't get their support now, then you'll never get to implement your super progressive program in the future. And like I'm really like, I get that, but at the same time there's like, and I think I mentioned this in my Ask Away a couple nights ago, like when President Kennedy said we're going to the moon, he said we're going to the moon. He didn't say, well, maybe we'll go to the moon eventually. I don't know. But, let's get some ships up in orbit first and we'll see what happens. Yeah. Well, like I don't like aiming low to start. I like aiming high to start. And that's why I don't really, I like Mayor Pete's proposal doesn't really resonate with me. Like if that ended up being what we had to settle for, I think that would be great. I would love to have a public option. I would love to have like more subsidies for insurance premiums if that's what we have to do first, before we can move on to something a little bit more substantial. But there's something in me that I don't like starting with that. That feels like we're aiming low.
Steve, forgive me. No, Obamacare was seen as aiming high. Yeah. Well,
by some people.
It's no good if you've got half the people trying to undermine it and wish it to fail.
Yeah.
Nobody wished the moon landing to fail.
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
They were fighting against the Soviets. That's why.
With a nice message of a great piece of ideology, but unless you've got everybody behind you, then it's Medicare for all. It's the same sort of thing. But if you got the drug companies, Lockheed Martin were not trying to undermine the moon landing, were they?
That's very much not.
Yeah, except it wasn't even Lockheed Martin back then. I mean,
but you see my point. The aerospace industry thought we can get in on this.
That's a really great point.
Yes, they wanted to make profits.
To the drug companies.
That's a really great point.
It's not going to work.
That's a really great point. But what I was getting to is, I wonder if the Democrats and the people who are maybe not Democrats themselves, but are allying themselves with the Democrats, hoping to get something done here, if maybe there would be some way to appeal to that notion of American exceptionalism, to sell more progressive policies to people. Yeah,
we can do this.
Exactly. And not only we can do this, but everybody else already did it. Like if we want to be the exceptional nation, if we want to be the indispensable nation, like we always tell ourselves we are, why is it that all of the democracies in Europe have instituted some form of universal health care and we haven't?
Oh, actually,
everyone hands up. Everyone wants to talk.
Go ahead, Jacob. Go ahead.
On that point, there was a campaign like that done in the past. The slogan "Don't mess with Texas" was an anti-littering campaign. That's where it started.
I like that.
It just goes to your point. Yeah.
I like that.
The war against
But like I feel like that could appeal to people if they would say, hey, yeah, okay, maybe we are the greatest country in the world. Why the hell can't we do this? Everybody else has already done this.
The thing is, the people who think that we're already the greatest country in the world, they're the ones who are insisting we have the greatest healthcare, we have the greatest this, that, and the other. But again, without those additional qualifications at the end of the sentence.
Yeah.
They just block it off there. They don't want to hear it. And these are the people who want the Overton window to stay exactly where it is. They don't want it to move an iota. Again, mostly because they just want to chop it off at we're the greatest, period.
Yeah.
And they don't want qualifiers.
Yeah, see, now, one place I think where what you're talking about, Steve, can work really well is with energy independence.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Because I've done this actually with some, I've turned a few, semi-right-wing people like basically saying, hey, look, we're America. Why are we being dependent on other countries for our energy? And and I also pointed out that all those countries in the Middle East that you're afraid of, that have all this power. Well, Saudi Arabia is only powerful because oil is valuable. So if we take that power, if the United States, kind of drops out of the oil market as far as being consumers, all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia's power and Dubai and all these places. They shrink, and their influence in the world, their ability to export, all sorts of things that we don't necessarily like, goes away.
Yeah, they're still got to acknowledge the climate crisis, which they're nowhere near doing.
But here's the thing. But again,
right.
Steve's point is like, you don't even. So meanwhile, you do think you're doing something for the climate. You don't even have to bring it up. You just have to point people in the right direction. That's really what matters.
Terrorism by not buying their oil.
I think there's an additional factor in there as well. Is that to a certain degree, I think you have to be involved in the oil and gas market to manipulate the oil and gas market into, evolving from being a power and energy and combustion source into doing other things like lubrications and manufacturing and other things, because the blunt end of the stick is it is still a limited market, and eventually it's going away.
Well, see, one thing that I had said years ago, I'm talking 25 years ago, that I felt that the way to get the big oil on board is to kind of go to them and say, look, you're rich and powerful, and you obviously want to maintain.
And no one say it that way, and to say it that way forever.
You want to maintain your dominance. We get that. Everyone understands it, whether we like it or not. But so here's the way. So we're fond of giving out tax breaks for our businesses, and say, okay, well, if you transform your business toward cleaner sources of energy, you have access to all these cool tax breaks, and so this way you have at least a chance to maintain your dominance. But you're going to have to, change. So don't be like Smith Corona, where we're going to make typewriters forever. Now, and now Smith Corona is nowhere, or Polaroid and with cameras. Say, hey, you can don't make the mistake they did. We're going to give you the opportunity to maintain your dominance, economically, if you go in the right way. You know what? Yeah, it's giving somebody good, but the thing is, my attitude is there's always the sharks. Someone's gonna take the dominance and lead. I'd rather have them here, and I'd rather have the good policy.
The thing is, you don't just have to talk to them. You don't just have to talk to the oil and gas people. You have to talk to the guys in the Senate and the House who are accepting, their donations and everything else, and they're living on that. Yeah. You've got to move them as well.
But see, the thing is, though, if you convince the oil and gas lobby, now they'll actually lobby for it themselves. You actually get them to do.
If you convince them that it's in their interest, Well, but that sounds great. That might be more difficult than it sounds, because I've wondered for a long time at why, like, the energy companies that exist now that are primarily interested in fossil fuel energy production, even though we know that there's an expiration date on that, like we know that's going to run out eventually, why they haven't been the ones pushing for renewable energy more than anybody else and trying to dominate that market. Because that's the future. There's a few more decades in coal and oil, but there's no long-term future in that. But we're never going to run out of sun. Like, we're never going to run out of wind. If you go to the Saudis and the oil-rich countries in the Middle East and say, hey, you're going to run out of oil eventually, but you know what else you have a lot of besides oil? Sun. And that's not going anywhere. Like, you can still be dominant in the energy industry. Just do it this way, which will be inexhaustible, and you can still be a powerhouse. And the happy side effect is it won't continue to wreck the environment if we do it right, But that hasn't happened.
Yeah, and a little bit of why that hasn't happened is I think you've got a whole bunch of people who still can't think past their quarterly P&L reports.
That's it exactly.
Well, okay, no. Joe McClory has his hand up.
Joe, you want to say something? Joe McClory.
That's cool.
I don't know if convincing them is the right path. The example you gave was typewriters and film cameras.
Polaroid.
Do you know what killed those two things? Those two things were killed by markets that were created by government spending.
Oh, that's
computers were able to gain a foothold because the government, in the form of universities and the military, funded them. And that killed typewriters. The optics for phones and for digital recording and for the computing necessary to make cell phones was because of spending in military and government and like NASA for optics.
But Joe, that's actually my point. That actually saying, hey, look, we're going to shift government spending and we're going to give you tax breaks. There's going to be financial interest for you to go to not be Smith Corona.
I was just going to say that the thing is, like someone like we said a moment ago, they're not allowed to think that far ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, they're only supposed to think about what will maximize profit right now in the next few months. You try to convince them that, oh, well, what about the next quarter after that, or the next few quarters, or a year, or a decade? They'll say, no, stop that. That's anti-business. That's just gonna make
Right.
us shortchange ourselves when we could be making more profit.
What about the shareholders?
Yeah. Well, and actually, Steve, you wonder why though? Because obviously the shareholders, ultimately do care about long-term profits as well. It's basically for the same reason that the French built the Maginot Line. Is everyone's still fighting the last war? Everyone's still doing the same thing, and it's very hard, especially with something like telling people, okay, this resource which appears plentiful is finite and is going to run out, even though all the evidence is showing that we have reached peak oil. The reason why fracking and for shale has become economically viable. I mean, we didn't know about it. I remember things talking about it back when I was a kid in the early 70s. But the thing is that because the easy oil is gone, and so we're drilling deeper and we're going farther. We're having to go through more hoops to get the oil out of the ground or wherever it's located. And so the fact that they're even being willing to do that tells you how bad the long-term situation. So they do know, but they still can't accept it, I think.
Yeah. There's also the matter of the fact that they're going through greater risk to get that oil, and for that, I got two words for you: Deepwater Horizon.
But the thing is, companies do know about, like, cigarette companies knew that their cigarettes were killing people, but it was economically inconvenient for that truth to get out there. So they wanted that truth not to get out there. Oil companies know what they're doing and know that it is in fact impacting climate change and is making it terrible for like the other parts of the world. We're having climate change refugees right now, but they continue to do it because it is continued to be profitable as it is right now.
And they're focusing at the end of their nose instead of looking out on the horizon. And until you can change that focus, you're going to have the status quo.
The thing that's weird though is that the cigarette companies, the tobacco companies, they didn't have any alternative. They didn't have some nicer, cleaner product to turn to continue to make money. The oil companies do. That's the thing that gets me.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the matter of the fact that, let's be real, the cigarette companies are drug manufacturers. Well, worse than drug, they're addictive drug manufacturers, and they have no real purpose other than to sell an addictive substance.
And they're poorly regulated.
Yeah. I want to take a second and I usually don't pay attention to the live chat while we're talking here, but someone one of the viewers in the live chat, 255 AD, said Steve's face is really going to be red in 5 billion years. So
I did see that.
So yes, I will acknowledge solar power is not truly inexhaustible. Eventually the sun will swell and consume the earth, and then we won't be able to draw solar power anymore, but we'll be good until then.
We'll probably be living on a different planet, and we won't even look like we do now.
We'll have energy until our species goes extinct. So,
but Steve, just think about it: when the sun starts to swell, before Earth is rendered a dead world, it'll actually get better for a while.
And the sun is a red giant now. Own libs, own. That's not one of this.
Screw you, Mercury. Nobody liked Mercury anyway. Who needs Mercury?
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna consume our world eventually too.
Well, it's the I won't be here anymore. Feeling, it's not going to happen to me,
totally.
So I don't care.
Yeah.
Screw your generation.
Yeah. What floors me about that is these guys say they don't care about what happens to them, and yet they can't be bothered to think about their kids. And because I do.
Yeah.
And I mean, my daughter's going to be by 2050, she will be.
Lauren, their kids will be fine because they will be in the magic of the space bubble in the sky, away from it all, because they have the money to do it.
And in the immortal words of Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, everyone who believes that, stand on your head.
This is where I really start to think there is something genuinely wrong with these guys, because we're all saying that we of course want future generations to be all right. We want our kids to be all right, etc. Why don't these guys have that instinct? Are they just not wired that way? Are they wrong that way?
Yeah.
Also they understand that at least for the first couple of generations, their wealth will insulate them from the climate catastrophes.
Yeah. Well, and also, I think a lot of it is just there's a natural tendency among, I think probably all of us have this to a certain degree. We just sort of assume that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think like the people who are saying like, oh, they're not, you know, they're not worried about what the world will be like for their kids or their grandkids. They probably just have this innate assumption that, well, it'll be fine.
Right. And that's where part of that is how many times, and I've seen this multiple times, I'm sure you have as well, members of Congress who have said that, like, well, you know, the Earth's not going to get baked to a crisp because, you know, God let that happen. And of course, you know, God let all those species get wiped out that we wiped out, but, you know.
Well, we get that from the guys who have bringing the snowballs into Congress and saying, "See, I just made this the other day." You know what climate change? That whole mindset,
because which is like basically, going out at 1 a.m. and yelling. You know, the idea that it's getting lighter is ludicrous because it's dark out.
What, son? Come on.
Honestly, I honestly think that like caring about others hurts their profits. Last month, okay, hey Nick, you asked like what's our favorite Terry Jones like a sketch from Monty Python's Flying Circus. There's one sketch where it's like a banker played by John Cleese, just a banker who gets like all these propositions from many different people. The one person in the sketch was Terry Jones, who was playing a beggar on the streets. Could you give me a pound or give me a pence? And then John Cleese was just like going through expecting this to just be a normal proportional thing, and it's like, so in this, hold on, I'm trying to understand this because it seems that throughout this entire exchange, I lose a pound. Why would I do that? Because like you have so many pounds and I just need one to buy food for tonight. But I'll be losing a pound. But honestly, people don't want to lose money. They just don't. And they don't even want the slowdown of the profits, because not only because of their company, like Shell, but the shareholders demand it too. They demand these quarterly earnings each month. They demand these slower things. If I put $1,000 into stocks, I'm expecting that stock to be worth like $1,011 or more. They want 3% growth, 3% growth, 3% growth. The problem is it's like 3% each quarter or each year, and there's only so much. If you we started at 3% growth at like the 1700s, then it'll be like 525% or something like that.
Well, actually, 3% growth is actually easy. I mean, actually, the market does 11% over any long historical period. That's the thing that gets me is that, and the other thing is that people that are investors that don't even understand how investments work. That the idea that, okay, I put money out, but there could be even if it looks like I'm just throwing money into a well, that it has payoff. Like Utah, of all places, decided that, hey, we're going to do something about homelessness, and we're just going to give people a place to live. The little tiny houses, but they're going to have a place to live. They're going to have an address and a safe place to sleep and take a bath and eat food and all that. And they found that spending that money, which seemed like they were just throwing it into a well, actually was better. It actually cost less money because people were able then to integrate with society, and for those that were able to work, were able to get jobs and contribute, and it actually costs less. It actually costs less to give people a house than it did to have them on assistance and to have them in shelters and things.
For me, it just kind of highlights the absurdity of like what's happening right now. Like all these people on MSNBC going like, well, okay, Bernie won, in that state. But if you add up the 3 or 4 people after him, they got more votes. It's like, that's not how elections work. But it really is just showing that, these people, if it came down to the wire, they really would rather subject us to 4 more years of Trump than have to pay a little more in taxes. They're just so attached.
Bill Gates said that himself in a comment. He would think about like voting for Trump again if it's like Warren was the nominee with just her modest like wealth counter tax.
It's like these babies.
It's capitalist entitlement. It's capitalist entitlement.
It's an obscenity for someone that rich to say, well, I'm going to vote for someone whose policies are absolutely monsters because I don't want to pay a smidge more in taxes that I will never miss anyway. But about what Nick just said about the pundits saying like, well, sure, Sanders won the Nevada caucus, but if you add up the less progressive candidates, then they add up to more. I mean, that reminds me of one of my a talking point that Chris Matthews says this a lot, and I've never thought that, and I've never thought that this was an intelligent thing to say, but he says it, and a lot of people, like in the sort of commentary class on political shows and news shows say this.
They're upper class, yes.
They say, well, after a big general election, and let's say the Republicans win the White House and the Senate, but the Democrats retain control of the House. And some dipshit, thinking that they sound smart, will always say, well, historically, the American people have often chosen to have divided government. As though we all got together and made a decision and said, you know what? Let's let one party run one house and one party run the other because we like it that way. That's just the way it works. It doesn't. We didn't choose to have divided government as a conscious choice. It was the result of the election.
Again, that's also assuming that the voting public is engaged and maintaining its, being informed, which is the biggest shibboleth I've heard since who knows what. I mean, the people are going with their feelings far more than they're going with their intellect. And that's deadly.
Yeah, well, there's this idea when it's phrased that way. There's this idea, this suggestion that there's some wisdom in that. That it's like, oh, it's the wisdom of the American people. They know not to give too much executive power or legislative power to a single party. They want to have that check. It's the wisdom of the electorate. It's like, as if there was any such fucking thing.
I would say this, Steve. There are people like that. I've met lots of them.
Yes, so have I.
But the thing is, I agree with you that they're not at all wise.
No, not at all.
Basically,
no.
And really, I don't want to say that's, and I know that European. I want to get into the whole European right left versus our right left. But just from within our own thing, there are people who confuse the middle and the center. Mm-hmm. And I think I might have mentioned this last time I was on how. The center, so you have your axes, and the center is the center. But because of the Overton window,
the center's always a moving target.
And there's a moving target. And what happens is you get the people who kind of do like, oh, split the baby. Well, why can't the Jews and the people who hate Jews, come to some compromise like how much they should hate Jews,
Right. No, certain number of Jews.
Because ideology.
We only hate Jews a little bit. That'll be okay.
The thing is that those people are actually not the center. They are in the middle, and they're basically appealing to a false middle, and that's if they're actually people engaging in fallacious thinking. Now, someone who's actually in the center, and that's why sometimes I get irritated with people because it's like, well, no, a centrist doesn't do that. A centrist is in the center still, and centrists say, okay, the people that are hating on people, okay, well, that's wrong. Where does their hate come from? And let's see if we can address the core issues that kind of get to that. Maybe, just like the whole Arab-Israeli conflict, you can find pieces that are accurate and would be legitimate gripes, and then it gets covered over in a lot of hatred and bigotry and stuff like that. So a centrist will look at that and say, okay, and then a centrist also doesn't care whether a solution is conservative or liberal, as long as they're more pragmatic and they're looking at is it effective, and to what degree and to whatever its limitations, and do we need to have any workarounds to pick it up in the places that it doesn't work. But unfortunately, people have confused. Both the people who do it and the people who observe it have confused the center and the middle. Yeah. And so it's and the middle is right now is way to the right. The center is where it is.
I would personally, I prefer the term to more identify as an independent, where it's like, okay, I'll take very left issues. Sometimes occasionally I'll side with the other side on a few issues, just sort of take it issue by issue.
Yeah.
Well, rather than having some preset mindset towards one side or the other.
And there are also people like I know people, and I've known people in my family who when they go to vote, like they almost never would vote a straight ticket for anybody for any election. But that's not necessarily because they have come to some considered decision that it is the best thing to have divided government between parties. Like I know my grandfather Pap, who I've talked about before, he was pretty sure he was registered Republican his whole life, but his favorite politician was always Barbara Mikulski, who was our senator here in Maryland for many years and was a Democrat. And he loved Barbara Mikulski and voted for her every single time she was up for re-election. And and for him personally, because we talked about it, it had nothing to do with her political affiliation. It had to do with the fact that he perceived her as someone who helped her community and was good for us and was good for the state and listened to her.
Well, she was one of these people who was A, marvelously plain spoken, and B, she was also very much a pragmatist.
Absolutely, and he really loved her, despite the fact that she was not a member of his party and opposed the goals of the party he was registered with in many, many occasions. And I think a lot of people vote for those reasons. A lot of people are registered with one party or another, and they vote for individual candidates regardless of party because they have some personal reason for voting for them. And
in a healthy democracy, we would have several parties, a spectrum of them to accommodate all of these people.
Sure.
We just have the two. And one gets to position themselves, a certain way, and then say that the other are extremists.
Yeah.
Well, and also in the democracy, interesting. I listened to yesterday's Social Justice Alchemy because explaining to a French person, Letta Arno, how a caucus works is very interesting. And again, it's just like, the caucus is kind of like privileged people who are able to go somewhere on a 7 p.m. on a weekday night, on a work night, and are able-bodied and don't have social anxiety, so they're willing to talk to people that they just met, and sometimes maybe are okay being willing into peer pressure to come to our side, come to our side, come to
that's kind of crazy.
Caucuses don't make sense to me, and I'm someone who is fairly well informed on our political process. I'm sure to someone from another country, why would you ever do it that way?
I would define democracy as it's run by the people, it's made by the people. We tally votes and elect representatives to make democracy, which I say means it's the representative that makes the laws, and I know that's how we have done that for 200 years since the birth of this country, but I see that as just I'm not making decisions about how this country or the city or this county or this state is run. Someone else is doing that. It seems fine now, but then when anarchists argue, would you want someone else to decide your meals for you? And I'll be like, okay, yeah, I can see that. So that's where it's I would say, you guys can call it democracy. I wouldn't.
That doesn't really bother me because it's like a verbal shorthand. It's like when people say technically it's not a democracy, it's a republic, which is a form of a democracy. It's a verbal shorthand. It's it's not direct democracy, it's representative democracy, but we don't want to say representative democracy every time we refer to it, so we shorthand it. That doesn't really bother me that much. I see what you're saying. I get there is a distinction, but I don't really
And the problem for us really in this country is lack of engagement. And because
when we're working 3 jobs to just survive as well.
Right. Well, exactly. Well, the thing is, you think about, and I was arguing with a friend of mine who was hardcore Bernie person, and he was saying he was trying to come up with the kind of rehash the 2016 election. I'm like, dude, that's long dead. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
But the point I was trying to make to him, because he was saying, the young, and I was telling him that, look, don't count on young people to make the difference because they historically never have. Because I talked about the 2016 primary cycle. You can come up with all the complaints and try to blame the DNC and everything, but the fact of the matter is, the turnout for the Democratic primary process was 15% of the eligible electorate, and young people were 12%. So the people who liked Bernie the most showed up the least, and if they had just showed up in equal numbers, he would have been the nominee.
Yeah.
So my thing is so if people actually get out and get engaged, and that's always been the case. We get a turnout of 55%. We're patting ourselves on the back. Which is insane. Yeah. More people didn't vote for either of them than actually voted.
You just need to get people excited. What did Obama run on? He ran on change, and people desperately want that. People know something is wrong with this country. They are tired of the current system. They want it changed. And right now we have candidates like Amy Klobuchar who are saying, no change. Let's just keep things as they are. I'm not going to do anything for you.
Yeah.
Well, now, one thing I will say to your point before about Steve about the media and how they frame the whole, that it's they add up all the consent to the Bernies.
Yeah.
There is. I did take one takeaway, not the takeaway they want us to take away, but a different takeaway, and not so much Nevada, because look, he won Nevada handily. I mean, that's there's no argument there. So what I do is I've been kind of looking at, okay, Sanders plus Warren, because they have some differences, but they're very, very
similar. Yeah,
they're closer together than everyone else.
So what's the votes for progressive versus the not progressive, or the not so progressive, or not as progressive, whatever you want to look at it.
Yeah.
So in this one again, the two of them are greater than 50%. So clearly in Nevada, that those ideas play very well.
Mm-hmm.
In Iowa, they were like 35. They're about a little bit more than a third, at 35, or maybe a little bit smidge below 40. So there, I'm like, okay, it's like 3-2. So what that tells me is not, we need to go one way or the other. But what it does tell me is that basically, on the left, whatever degree we are to the left, whatever degree we don't want Trump and the current Republicans to be in charge, neither one of us can win without the rest of us. So because we're not going to win with 40% of the left, and we're not going to win with 60% of the left. So we have to, and that's why I get so upset when I run into people who are like completely unwilling to have any level of compromise whatsoever. And I'm like, well, that's a bullshit attitude. It's a losing attitude.
Bernie is the compromise.
Not to me.
But to me, Bernie is compromise.
Yeah, but see, if you're basically, I'll vote for Bernie and not Warren, at least Warren or anybody else, then you are part of the problem. Flat out, you are part of the problem.
I feel like I have to.
Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was going to agree with you. I do. I mean, when it comes to a general election, and especially when it comes to the kind of the choice that we're going to have presented to us, where it's going to be Trump versus one of those people that were on stage the other night. I feel like if you have any progressive inkling, and I can imagine how hard it might be for someone who is like a radical leftist to have to consider voting for someone like Joe Biden or Amy Klobuchar, who are certainly not close to that level. That
Bloomberg's
degree.
Worse though.
Yeah, Bloomberg. But I mean, I think hopefully we can relax about Bloomberg a little bit. I really don't think it's going to be Bloomberg.
No, we can't.
But I mean, even Bloomberg. I mean, I would have to hold my nose to vote for Bloomberg, but I would do it if the alternative was Trump. But I feel like if the alternative is Republicans win, then I don't see how it's a responsible thing to not vote for the Democrat, even if the Democrat is far short of your standard for what you would want for a candidate. Because at that point, as fucked up as it is and as unfair as it is, you have two options, and it's a lesser of two evils situation. And we can argue about we should reform the system so there are more viable candidates, and I agree with that completely. I agree with that. I would love to see more viable candidates. I would love to see more viable political parties. I would love to have something other than a strict two-party system. But in November of this year, we're going to have two choices.
Right.
Let me bring this and point this out, and not necessarily agree with it. And the person who talked about this on Chapel Trap House, and I have my severe problems with Chapel Trap House. But here's the thing, and I understand we can criticize the Bernie or bust people all day long, and I agree with those criticisms. I will vote for Liz Warren quite happily. Would have been more happily early in the campaign, but Liz Warren is also a compromise. And others people, Bloomberg's the worst, but it's okay, I'll vote for blue. But then again, I'm in blue state in Washington State, so it doesn't matter. Except if my electorates don't vote for Bloomberg, like they didn't vote for Hillary, some of them did. Yeah. But if we all know about the Bernie and bust crowd. But if there are a significant chunk that won't vote for anyone else in the general, but will vote for Bernie if it's Bernie, and if that chunk of people is a sizable enough chunk to possibly sway the election in certain swing states, then it would behoove us if all those things are true. That's a series of three different truths. Yes, if all those are true, then we have to vote for Bernie because there is a sizable amount of people that will only vote for Bernie.
Well, basically means we're being held hostage.
Well, that's exactly right.
And there's another point too, though.
But they will not change their mind. They will not change their mind.
But there's another point. There's another point that we have to bring up if we talk about that. And it's something that Joe said a few minutes ago. I mean, there were a lot of people who professed to be major supporters of Bernie in the primaries in 2016 who did not show up and vote for him. So if we're going to say, well, it's our best shot to nominate Bernie because then we get the Bernie or busters, like that sounds great. And I would agree with that in principle, but they still have to show up and vote. And unfortunately, a lot of them who make a lot of noise in favor of Bernie and say he's our guy, he's the only one we'll support, don't actually show up to vote for him when they have the chance. Right. So we could nominate Sanders, and I wouldn't have a huge problem with nominating Sanders no matter what, because I think I would happily vote for him if he were the nominee. I support pretty much everything he says, so I wouldn't have a problem with nominating Bernie Sanders for any reason. But if we're going to nominate him under the pragmatic reason of, well, we have to nominate him so all of his supporters will support us and will win the election, that's predicated on them actually showing up and voting for him, which they don't always do.
They haven't.
Steve?
Yeah.
One thing, a point I'd like to make in the midst of all this, we've got yet another tripwire coming up very shortly, being South Carolina. Yeah. South Carolina is going to be very interesting because of the much larger African-American vote that's going to be there, because we haven't had that in Iowa. We sure as hell didn't have it in Nevada. And it's going to be exceptionally telling the dynamic of how the vote is going to be, because I think the pattern of not just who's going to win it, but who's going to be second, third, fourth, et cetera, who is essentially going to be taking the African-American vote. And while it's not necessarily perfectly representative of the African-American vote, it's going to be the first sample we've had. Now you've got that, and you've got Super Tuesday coming up, which is, I'll tell you what, Super Tuesday could be the backbreaker. I think that once that is gone, we've got to reconcile ourselves to the fact that whoever's got the bulk of the votes there more than likely has a nomination. Point being, at that point, the Democratic Party either starts pulling together, or we have to face the very real possibility of 4 more years of Trump.
Right. Now, I will say that, as Marty had pointed out in her Tea Party Hardy with Marty, go check it out. Or on Social Justice Alchemy when she was a guest, and she's welcome back on at any time. Well, that's just me speaking, if not for the rest of the cast. Bernie is terrible at reaching out to the black voters and reaching out to queer voters. It's kind of bad campaigning for him to expect that they're just going to vote for him regardless. As it is kind of bad to just expect that all those radical leftists, all those people are going to vote for the D, for blue, no matter who, even Shives sandwich, because who else are they going to vote for? And so, but I do think that since Bernie does excite those people, and we can differ on how sizable each portion of those groups are and how effective they are, or will they vote or not, definitely. And I do criticize the Bernie bus crowd as well, definitely. But where's my damn it? I lost my point.
Well, see, here's one thing I want to say about that. And again, I won't say the person's name because I don't want to make it about that person, just because they're representative of an attitude I've encountered. But it's a prominent YouTube atheist who is a Bernie or buster. And what I thought was hilariously hypocritical is that this person said to, not just to me, but to a few of us, well, if Bernie's the nominee, are you going to just vote blue or what? I'm like, absolutely, because I'm not a fucking idiot and I can do math. And here's the thing.
Exactly.
I said my candidates are already out. For me, it was Harris or Booker. So for me,
Harris transphobic as fuck.
And so I said, look, I could take your position and I could say, well, I didn't get Booker or Harris, so fuck the whole process, and I can go out and do nothing. But I'm not going to do that, because getting Trump, even though and I'll tell you this, as far as all the candidates, I like Liz Warren, although she's not my first choice. I actively dislike Bernie. I actually don't like him. But you know what? Not only will I vote for him, I will campaign for him, and I will donate money to his campaign. Because having him over Trump is the
bottom line is simple. Do you want 4 more years of Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Answer, no.
Yeah,
Shit,
exactly.
I want revolution.
Shit, if it's required, and I don't want him to have a Monica, I'll blow Bernie to avoid a Monica Lewinsky moment, just so we get rid of Trump. That's how.
Who would you rather? And this message did not resonate very much at all, unfortunately, last time around. And we've seen the result. Hopefully, it would resonate a little bit more this time. Who would you rather be able to appoint Supreme Court justices for the next 4 years?
Yeah,
how
not just Supreme Court justices, but I mean,
oh my God,
I think we are a few people who actually
lifetime appointments again. And who says that, like, Mitch McConnell, if he had control of the Senate, wouldn't just hold on for 4 more years, or isn't that? Because as we've seen before, having someone with that much power like Mitch McConnell, who has just all this rhetoric and at those drive to like just
but even then, I mean, you still have you have to play the different possible scenarios against each other and say, well, what would you prefer? And even if we assume
revolution,
but that's not on the ballot. Even if we assume that,
which is why I voted not this.
Of course, actually, that's a silly thing to say. Of course, revolution wouldn't be on the ballot. That's the whole point. But
yes, exactly.
Even if you assume that the Republicans retain control of the Senate and a Democrat wins the White House and their judicial appointments get slow walked and held up and everything, that's still better than having a Republican president and getting to appoint whoever they want and them just sailing through. Right. It's not the ideal. Obviously, it would be. I would love to have a Democratic president and a Democratic majority in both houses of Congress, so they can appoint whoever the fuck they want to the federal bench and start to move the court back from the far right that it's been lurching toward. That's my dream for the morning after Election Day. I wake up and that's it. But if that's not it, I would still rather have a Democrat in the White House just to prevent things from getting that much worse.
Right.
I mean, that's also a shitty option, but if that's my best option, I'm taking that option.
Yeah, there's also the matter of the
I'll take a daily. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
There's also the matter of the fact that one of the biggest problems with having Trump in the front seat is that he is the front seat. He is the person who is representing us internationally. He is the person that is making the United States a laughing stock, and we can't afford that.
Hey, Steve, I put it like summarize what you said this way. Yeah. I'd rather take a weekly beating than a daily beating.
Exactly. I'd rather
be still taking a beating, so we got to end the beating. Honestly,
I'd rather be shot in the leg than shot in the head.
I'm sorry, but
I don't want to be shot I don't think we should. I don't want to get shot anywhere. But if you're going to shoot me, shoot me in the leg.
If I have no choice but to get shot.
If I have no choice to get, exactly.
We're shot either way. People dying either way. We are dying.
But would you want one person to die or 500 people to die?
Well, yeah,
that's the whole point. That's the choice.
Yeah, there's a short-term choice.
Why is there a choice of that?
There's a short-term choice and a long-term choice. And I agree. I agree.
And again, the people here in this room, understand we can look long-term. Yeah. The problem is the thousands and millions of other people who can't be bothered.
Yeah.
If I may, I'm sorry, I just have one thing to say.
Go for it.
And this isn't about the Bernie or bust niche. I'm not worried about that. Look, I'm worried that, you see, if it ends up being someone like, yes, Elizabeth Warren, or even someone like, good Lord, Pete Buttigieg. All right, we might have a shot. But if it ends up being someone like Biden or Mike Bloomberg, basically buying his way to being nominee, that is the worst case scenario. Because this isn't about like Bernie or bust people. People are just going to stay home. Because they'll think, well, what's the difference? People who aren't as online as we are, who aren't as conscious of all these things, and probably watch Fox News sometimes.
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, though. There are people who watch Fox News who would otherwise vote for Trump that might actually vote for Bloomberg. So, and again, I don't like Mike Bloomberg. I don't want him to be a nominee, and I really don't think he's going to be. I mean, he didn't even show up on the list. For Nevada,
he got scrapped.
He got waffle stomped.
I'm not sure he was even on the ballot, to be honest.
If it comes to the worst,
was the first time he was on the
I will bite the bullet and vote for whoever the nominee is. As soul crushing as it may be, it is better than the alternative.
Right, exactly.
But there are many people who will be so jaded and ambivalent by that point, they'll just be like, I'm just throwing in the towel.
See the thing for me too, and the reason why I actually don't think that we should kowtow to the Bernie or busters. Again, if Bernie ends up being the nominee, I'm going to support him, 100%.
Again, I'm not talking about them.
I'm not actually replying to you really, but basically to me, there are.
My Bloomberg's on my ballot. I had the ballot for like Washington State. My Bloomberg's on my ballot for Washington State primary, which will be on the 10th. But this is about the like early access.
All right,
okay, go ahead.
Let's let him finish.
But the thing is that basically, when you have, because they have a bad track record of showing up, what I'd rather do is because I remember seeing like the number of people who didn't show up in 2016, a lot of them.
Yeah.
So if I would rather find out, why, because a lot of the Bernie busters are people who don't normally vote anyway. So, and again, they couldn't even be arsed to vote for Bernie when they had the opportunity. So I'm kind of like, I don't give a shit what they think. I'd rather deal with all the people who could be reached and could come out, and that's going to include mainline liberal Democrats and just center left Democrats and Republicans who don't want the Republic to continue to fall into the abyss. I'm fine.
I don't think there's many of that point of that group. But go ahead.
There's lots. There's hell, Joe Walsh, who was like a very right wing. He's a Tea Party guy, and he's like, vote for a Democrat. I mean, come on.
Hell, even
Joe Scarborough, for crying out loud.
Even the desiccated mummy of Clint Eastwood came out, and he endorsed Bloomberg, but still technically a Democrat.
Bloomberg,
technically a Democrat, but and I love Clint.
Republican Mayor Bloomberg.
Clint said
he was a Democrat before that.
Clint said he said the best thing we can do is vote for Bloomberg, and then he also said I wish Trump wouldn't talk the way he does, and I was like, thanks, Clint. So I wish he would commit fewer war crimes. But I mean, I wish he would not talk that way too. So okay, anyway. Yeah, it's on my list. It's kind of low on the list, but it's on my list too of objections to Trump. Yeah. So anyway, we're over the hour, so I'm going to wrap this up. But does anybody have any final thing to say that they didn't get to say because everybody was talking over each other before?
Yeah. Jacob, do you have something to say?
Yeah,
Jacob.
Or has that ship sailed?
Hello, Jacob. Is you there?
He's probably paying attention to something else.
Well, I have one, and it's about the Electoral College. Like one of the biggest points people make to defend that system is they'll say, well, if we didn't have the Electoral College keeping all the giant states in check, then every election would be decided by just like 3 or 4 states. I'm like, that's funny. I could swear we had a system like that already.
Yeah, and aren't the giant states the most dominant?
And when's the last time North Dakota changed an election?
Yeah, that's it.
We already have that system where it's just a few select states where if you don't win in those, you're not going to be the nominee.
Well, I feel like we would kind of be stuck with that system no matter what. I mean, that just whether it's electoral college or national popular vote total. I mean, it just makes sense that candidates are going to favor large population centers, which are also the states that have the most electoral votes. So, like I feel like if the argument in favor of the Electoral College is, well, we have to keep it because it forces candidates to pay attention to the rest of the country, it doesn't really.
Well, I mean,
it's only pay attention to
remove
certain
first
amount
past
anyway.
the post and add ranked preference voting, and that would make it so that you would have to go to every place.
I'll make one final statement.
Yes.
We have talked all this time about like elections and about voting. Voting can only do so much. I have to remember this as well. So just as Phoenix in her like latest videos show a bunch of different like images. One image she show anti-fascist activism is not just punching Nazis. That's a part of it, and it's all good. So punch all Nazis because it's only costing. But anti-fascist activism is also helping out soup kitchens, building for houses for all, or buying houses for like the people with houses can like actually have homes, or people who are homeless to actually have houses. It's about building up a community, protect the community, community activism, community care, mutual aid. So there's voting can only do so much. I have to remember that too, as well as I say reform can only do so much. Reform is still good. It's harm reduction, and this is why we are so passionate about like our candidates or the process or the voting and stuff like that. But for good mutual aid, share the links down below. Share the links I just posted in the side chat, because as the process going, as we're going towards the general election or the primaries, and if the Democrats win and get control of the Senate and the House and do their process of like all these things, there's still people today that needs things. So we need to help out as much as we can. Don't exert yourself. I'm working 12 hours each day just to get as much overtime as I can, so I can like give it to like Joanna or to like Phoenix and to help them out. Just do what you can. Share the links around on social media. Find out local chapters so that you connect, work, then democratize the workplace, unionize the workplace, turn down the co-ops if you can, and
I would agree. I would agree with all of that. I would say do more than vote if you possibly can, but for God's sake, vote.
Absolutely vote.
If it is at all possible for you to vote in your election,
I have my ballot.
Please do so. Do more if you can. I agree. It's not, being a citizen is more than just voting. It's helping each other out. It's being active in the political process and in your community. And that's very important. But please,
Andrew Yang is still on my ballot. I'm sorry.
Don't waste your vote. Don't vote for Andrew. He's not.
Also, uncommitted delegates. I got the option of uncommitted delegates.
You can vote for uncommitted delegates.
I would just say my last thing. I just want to, especially after having some contentious moments here, I want to say I agree with the Geek's last point 100%. And I think that's part of the problem that we've had in the country. One, people don't vote, and then people vote and they think their job is done. They think that's it. And there's way more to it than that. Because even if we had a government that did all the things we want, we still would need people to get involved and do things to help others and to make it a kinder world and a world with less harm.
Yeah.
So I would say just a real quick on the Electoral College. I don't disagree with the things that have been said about the Electoral College, but I really honestly think, at least at this point, it's a waste of time to talk about, because even if we get a majority, it's literally it's impossible. I've heard people say that, this candidate or the other is going to get rid of it. That's not possible. The president doesn't have any role in the process.
Especially since the majority of states would have to approve it, and obviously
not
the
just
majority of states are benefiting.
It has to be a super majority, or we're talking about an amendment to the Constitution.
Right. It would be a constitutional amendment.
The supermajority in the House, the supermajority in the Senate, and a supermajority of the states, and that we're just not at that point. So I hope we get there someday, but I literally think it's an absolute waste of energy at this point to even have it be an issue or to vote for somebody based on that, because that's not.
I agree with that.
For the election to national politics, yes. However, during this time, there are elections there are changes in power for the people who in these states decide that. And there is a weapon against the Electoral College that is being developed, the National Interstate Popular Vote Pact.
Exactly. Yes, I was going to mention that.
Yeah. So I
local elections too. Vote in local elections. Those are
always.
Vote in local elections. Vote for state legislators. It's
put the politicians you put into any of the politicians, who no matter who they are, if they're in the positions of power, hold their feet to the fire.
Absolutely.
Yes. Make them if it has come to the point, make them afraid to even go out if they haven't done what you wanted them to. That's what happened in Argentina in 2001. How come we haven't done that here in the United States? But because of fear of losing our jobs.
I agree. I mean, I've said this a lot of times, especially to Democrats and left-leaning people. Like, especially if you feel as though you've had to settle and vote for someone who isn't as progressive as you are or as you would like them to be, get them in office and then lobby the shit out of them. Let them hear from you. You know,
that's a lot of energy, though. But take care of yourself.
Encourage them to keep their campaign promises first, and encourage them to push more in the direction that you want. Because if they hear from enough people, most of the time they will do that. It's because most politicians, even the noblest American politicians, are mostly cowards who just want to get reelected. So if they, I mean. If they think that most of their constituents want them to do this super progressive thing, they'll do it.
Right.
You know, like almost any politician's principles disappear when they find out that there's this really popular thing that they can do that will guarantee their reelection.
I know people on YouTube could only see us one at a time, but I love how on Zoom we look like the Brady Bunch.
Yes,
just looking at
totally. Yeah.
Steve can totally switch it up to that if he wants to. That's
I
how we are.
Yeah, I can show that if I want. I like seeing one speaker at a time. I just think it's less distracting. But yeah, I could totally show the Brady Bunch thing. Yeah, you can see us in our little.
That's what
just
like
it used to be on Google Hangouts, our little windows.
Just one.
Yeah. That's what we do on Social Justice Alchemy. It's a Brady Bunch there. But anyway, let's end the show.
All right. Yes. So anyway, thanks everybody for being here on the air with me as always. Thanks to everybody for watching. Patreon.com/Steve Shives if you want to support the channel. And that's it. We'll do this again next month. So thanks everybody for joining me. Thanks everybody for watching. And we'll see you later. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.